Hello everyone, welcome to another Quad Education Test Prep Fundamentals video. My name is Tom, and today we're going to be talking about a question type that's been appearing quite frequently recently on both the SAT Writing and ACT English. That question type is the difference between but and however, and it's pretty important for your understanding of how these punctuation questions work. Okay, let's take a look. All right, let's talk about but versus however. So I will preface this with, this is a pretty advanced topic that I've even seen tutors make mistakes on, so if you're not quite sure on the outset here what the difference between but and however is, I don't blame you. Hopefully we'll be able to clear that up today because the difference isn't that difficult to remember. Okay, before we jump in, here on the outset, looking at these two example sentences that I provided, which one is correct and why? Okay, if you said that both of these are correct, that's actually wrong. Only one of these is right, and it's probably not the one that you were thinking. So let's take a look. I would say that most people would say that the first one here is correct, and the reason that they would say that is that it sounds more in line with the tone of the passage. You know, in everyday speech, we don't really distinguish between but and however too much, but now that we're in, ACT and SAT technical writing, we do need to know the difference. So this first one right here is actually the one that's incorrect. And the second one here is right. And especially for those of you who are in AP English classes, your LITs and your LAs, you're probably kind of confused right now because I'm sure most of your teachers have said, avoid this word but right here because it's not particularly formal. And I'm sorry to say that that's incorrect. So here's the difference. However, as used on this test, is a transition. And a transition is exclusively a dependent clause that shows the relationship between one independent clause and the next one. So whatever clause that transition appears in will refer back to the previous clause and provide some logical information. So what's our flow? Is it however contrast? Is it for example? Is it moreover, whereas, what have you? I guess whereas is a conjunction, but what transitions will do is they'll show you what's going on between two independent clauses. And as you can see here, however is not surrounded by punctuation marks, which on this test, it will always need to be. So that could be a period to the left and a comma to the right, or it could be a semicolon to the left and a comma to the right, or I suppose it could also be commas around it. But regardless, as it's used in this test, however, will always be a transition. So very quickly, for those of you who are being very technical at home, saying that however can be a conjunction, yes, it can, but they'll never use it as a conjunction on this test. So an example of using however as a conjunction would be something like, however cold it is outside, comma, the writer still walked to work. So there, however, is being used completely differently than it is in this instance. And so here it's showing contrast between one clause and another. However cold it is would be to say, no matter how cold it is. So that would be however as a conjunction, but you'll never see it used as a conjunction on these tests. So let's show now why this first example is wrong and the second sentence is right. So referring back to our clauses video, and please watch that one if you've not seen before you watch this one, just because it's going to be really fundamental to the sort of words that I use here. So the journalist was scheduled to arrive on time at the news conference. That's an independent clause. However, she was delayed by traffic. So the fact that however cannot be a conjunction means that this is really technically still an independent clause. And as we've said many times, an independent clause, a comma, an independent clause is the worst error you can make in punctuation questions on the SAT and ACT. And the reason, by the way, that it's the worst error is that it is incorrect, but usually sounds pretty okay, which you can see here. And that's why the second example is correct, because we have that same independent clause, but then we have this really important conjunction right here. So a conjunction combined with an independent clause yields a dependent clause. So very important point there. And what that renders this sentence structure to be is an independent clause, a comma, then a dependent clause, which is fine. So really, really important distinction to make. First here we have I, comma, I, which is bad. And the second one we have I, comma, D, which is good. And so just two quick bullet points here to really condense what I just went through. So the problem with however. First, what is the effect a conjunction has on an independent clause? Well, it makes it dependent. And what's the effect of a transition on a sentence? Well, that's nothing, because transitions are dependent clauses, and they must be separated by commas. They don't affect the structure of the sentence that they're placed in. So keep that in mind as we see some examples. Okay, two example problems as usual here. And so usually I make these myself, but today I've decided to lift these from real tests just to show you that this is exactly how they'll be presented to you. So go ahead and give the first one a try and see how you do. Okay, let's take a look. So don't really worry about this end fragment here. New communication technologies will continue to emerge. Meanwhile, Morse code with its lack of sophistication could remain just as effective an asset. And meanwhile, also not a conjunction, so this is wrong because we have independent and an independent here, and sort of to throw you off the trail, we have this interrupting a positive. And really the structure of the sentence is new communication technologies will continue to emerge, independent, and then Morse code could remain just as an effective asset. So that's also independent. So what we have an issue with is this use of however here surrounded by commas, which makes this construction I, comma, D, comma, I, which we know to be bad. And then getting rid of it would make it just as bad. We just have I, comma, I. And then we have but here as a conjunction, and that's why but is correct. And so important point just to reemphasize, but is not an informal word. It's a formal conjunction that you can use whenever you want to show contrast between an independent clause and a dependent clause. Okay, so that first one was from an ACT. Now this one's from an SAT. Go ahead and see what you can do with this one. And so taking a look at this, you can see that's like pretty much the same thing. Other architects, and then we have this little intervening transition, which I'm going to get rid of. Other architects conduct and rely on research when they design buildings. That's a sentence. But Ajay's work, body of work has been defined by it. So with this conjunction right here, we have a nice independent comma dependent structure. But putting in either a transition or nothing will render this to be two sentences. So be very careful with this distinction. Okay, that's it for this video. Remember, the word however, at least in the way that it is used on these tests, does not affect structure in a sentence because it's a transition, whereas but used as a conjunction does. It makes an independent clause into a dependent clause. If you found this material useful, we hope that you'll like and share the video and subscribe to Quad Education. If you require any kinds of tutoring, please reach out to us. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.